We've been speaking about tolerance, tolerating. There's a man in my kollel who decided that tolerance and to be tolerant are two different words. And he went to look it up and he came back and said it's not true. Both of them are very patronizing words towards a person. I tolerate you it's not like I respect you. It's a different word. It means something different. Right? I'm putting up with you. Which in Hebrew, sovlanut, and sovel otcha. Sovel literally means to suffer because of you. But the other way around would be, I accept upon myself the burden of you.
Right.
That's the word. So that's essentially what tolerance means. I tolerate you. I don't want to put up with you, but I do. I tolerate you. And so there's all these organizations that speak about tolerance. Probably they should be using a different word. Not the word, unless that's all they want to accomplish, is people putting up with each other.
That's sort of like at least that.
At least put up with us.
It's kind of like a beginning. It is
starts like that.
You're right, sure.
As a base.
So there's an interesting verse. David HaMelech writes, Sur mera v'aseh tov. Leave evil and do good. David HaMelech. Sur mera v'aseh tov, bakesh shalom v'roter. And search for peace and chase after it. So my wife always tells the story of the Slonim Rebbe, the Netivot Shalom. The Slonim Rebbe asks the question, why is it that you have to do both? Why can't I just do good? Why do I have to leave evil? If I'm doing good, by definition I'm leaving evil. As the Slonim Rebbe says, he said there was a farmer who bought himself a new pair of boots. And he stepped outside and he found himself in the mud. He got very angry. His new boots are already in the mud. So he lifts up his right foot and he pulls out a towel from his pocket and starts wiping off his right foot. The shoe's clean, he puts it back down. Lifts up his left foot, wipes off the mud, puts it back down. Looks at his right shoe, it's all muddy again. He gets angry and he keeps doing this. Suddenly, I didn't tell you where he was from, right? It could be he was the farmer from Chem. His wife opens up the door. Sees him 20 minutes later, he's still in the driveway cleaning his boots. Just, you fool, just step onto the sidewalk and then clean your boots. But if you keep cleaning your boots while you're in the mud, of course they're going to stay muddy. A person can try to do as much good as they can, but so long as they're still in a bad situation, it's not going to get better. You can temporarily clean situations, but not actually reach a point where your boots are fully clean. Sur mera v'aseh tov. Rav Peretz, though, understands this verse a little bit differently. He says there are two levels in humanity. The basic level is every human being must strive, sur mera, not to do harm to anybody. You don't have to do good. You don't have to aseh tov. You don't have to do good to people. But you at the very least have to decide, I don't want to harm other people. So that might sound like it's an easy thing. Don't harm. So no, but lo lahazik, lo lahareah, not to damage other people, not to hurt other people, not to break other people. A person has to say, I might not want to do good with you. I might not want to be nice to you. I might not want to say hello to you. But I'm not going to scream at you. I'm not going to curse you. I'm not going to love you. I'm not going to hate you either. To at least choose sur mera. That's the very least that we can ask from humanity. You don't have to be a good person. Just don't be a bad person.
Isn't it tolerance?
That's tolerant.
Isn't it tolerance?
That's kind of like tolerant.
I'm trying to back your idea up, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. Sur mera.
No, thank you so much. Nope.
So you have another problem with tolerance, by the way.
I don't know. I'll try it first. Because I don't want to make you scared. Okay. Sorry.
Waitress, if you're already taking orders.
I'll go help her and listen.
So.
Paulette, could you get me some milk? Right?
I'm sticking to the tap water. Tolerance. Yes.
But I think the tolerance, I don't think it's not the same as being consciously aware of not trying to harm somebody. Because you have to be really aware of what you're showing how to do it. But tolerance is like you're so like.
Thank you.
I don't know. That person that I used is there. You're not interacting with her. You're just not throwing it away. I think they're quite different. At least tolerance doesn't feel like anything, like you're doing anything, like you're trying to evaluate. You're just saying, I'm going to make the best of it, but I don't want anything to do with it really.
No, I don't see it.
How do you see it?
I think if you put it into just plain terms of all of us sitting at the table, there might be somebody there that you really don't like, but you tolerate them because for peace, for the sake of peace, for shalom, better.
You stepped into a different department. Do you remember many years, 2 years ago, we studied Lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha.
Yes.
Do not hate your brother in your heart. Remember that?
That's
Yes.
right.
That we spent a long time on that verse.
Yes.
Tolerance essentially is saying hate him in your heart, just not
Verbally.
verbally.
Put on a show.
That's what it is. When you're tolerating somebody,
Yes.
Regardless of what you feel, but
You're putting on a show.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't sit right with me because it's tolerance is a level up. It's a big step from brutality. And if the Germans walked around today saying, "Well, we tolerate you, but we really can't stand you," that would be a problem because they have an obligation to learn tolerance.
well, that's what we're saying. Tolerance is not the ideal that everyone's making it out to be.
That's right.
It's not
That's what we're
Right.
discussing.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
tolerance is a very patronizing. I don't care for you. I don't like what you believe in, but I'm putting up with you.
That's right. And you're putting on a show.
You're putting on a show.
Yes.
Yes.
You're sort of putting on a show, but
Now, by the way, remember, what everyone's saying is not wrong. It could be that sometimes, for the sake of humanity, you might need to put on a show. It could be. It could be that you're in a situation and your choice of being truthful would be more damaging than putting on this show.
that's correct.
There is value to that.
Regardless of my feelings.
There is value to that. It's also like it's like a bomb waiting to explode.
That's right.
The wrong thing at the wrong time is. Just last night we watched a documentary here about the Beit HaMikdash. There's all kinds of groups in Jerusalem that want to rebuild the temple.
Yes, I saw that.
All kinds. It's a very interesting discussion to have, not for Tisha, but the interesting thing. I lived in the old city in Yerushalayim for 5 years, and the old city looks very calm. It looks very, you walk around, you go to the Kotel, there are bar mitzvahs, there are the Christians coming in the Via della Rosa walk, you go to the Muslim shuk to buy all kinds of things, to eat, to drink, whatever it is that you do there. But one mistake,
And the whole thing.
and that whole place is going to blow up. It's everyone's tolerating each other, but only to a certain extent, to a certain point. Some guy goes up there and wants to build a Beit HaMikdash, he might start World War III.
Right.
If a Christian wants to decide that his church needs to move over 1 foot, he might start World War III. These are things that we're tolerating each other, but the situations are volatile. They're ready to explode. They're ready to erupt.
But isn't it similar to what you just said that David HaMelech said? Don't do bad. Don't do good, but don't do bad.
Well, he says do good.
See, I would tell you that in a community, for example,
Last I told
and I can tell you that as a rabbi of a community, I very often, unfortunately, get to see the side of people I'd rather not have seen. The people who fight with each other, the families that don't get along with each other, the people that look like friends outwardly, but inside they're always whatever it is that you see inside of a community. And this idea of su'u merah, the very least you could do is just don't hurt them. What do you get from hurting them? I get you want to be on your little pedestal. You don't want to say Shabbat Shalom to them. Okay, but why do you have to go tell the person sitting next to them something bad about them? Why can't you just accept su'u merah? Accept the first step. I will not do something bad. Why is it so hard?
If it's in my mind, the evil, the bad, isn't it enough? I mean, isn't it already bad?
Already bad. So that's what we said with Lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha. Essentially, you're keeping the hate in your heart. That's a bad thing.
So
I mean,
it's already,
it's
I'm already in the bed.
Right. Remember the Rambam says, the Rambam over there said that if you hate your brother in your heart, you hate another person. And you go and slap them across the face because you hate them. By slapping them across the face, you did not violate Lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha. because you got it out of your heart. You violated, don't hit another person. You violated, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But at least this part you got out. Sure, the ideal would be that in your heart and in your head and in actions, you wouldn't hate somebody.
Although I think it's important to make a distinction with what you're asking. Initial feelings everybody has. You know, it's instinct. Somebody hurts you, so immediately you get defensive. You're insulted, so those feelings aren't what we're talking about. It's always the second thing. What do you do next? Do you let the anger now become bigger and more and hate? And it's not the instinct of I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm loving as much as what do I do next? Am I now consciously letting it live in my head? Am I consciously letting it take over my heart? Or am I making a choice to say, either I'm going to deal with it or I'm going to get rid of it?
So what is more important? What I have in my mind or what comes out?
Well, I guess this would be the big fight.
The way
This is not what we're trying to... I mean, this is the question.
I think
Is it better to be honest about these things? Or is it better to be good about these things? And
But
not
now you're in
speak
the
about
area
it?
of wisdom. Because taking responsibility for yourself, your feelings, your emotions, what comes out of your mouth, is a huge, tall order. Huge, tall order. And we are all required to be responsible for ourselves. And everyone's on a different learning curve to the degree where they're starting to figure it out and understand and look at themselves and see what it is they have to be responsible for and how to manage what they have to be responsible for. So someone not used to any of this stuff blurts it out and says, I don't like him, I never say Shabbat Shalom to him. And what is that? I would run like this from that person. That doesn't tell me anything about the person they're gossiping about. That tells me about her.
That's right.
It says something
that's-
about this
that's
human
where-
being that's talking about that human being
But a lot
over
of
there.
people are not aware of
But
that.
I'm saying, so everybody is on their own, everyone comes to this spiritual path, to the teachings, to everything we're talking about, at a different place, at a different level. Right?
But if I'm
Exactly
gossiping
what
in my mind, isn't it bad enough?
But if you recognize, I'm gossiping in my mind,
Yeah.
you are 2 steps ahead of the person who's gossiping and like has no clue that this is the wrong thing to do. The second you have recognition in your mind, you can now take some personal action. You can say, okay, I'm doing this in my mind, I don't like it. Let me go talk to Rabbi Yoni. Maybe he could have a suggestion for me, something I can work on, some psalm I can
But
say.
if you don't know what's wrong...
If
Yeah,
you
that's a
don't
good
know
idea.
it's wrong, you're in the dark,
Yeah.
you're blind.
But
I just
what
spoke
if
with
it's-
someone about this.
What if it's deeply ingrained in your condition that way from your household since you were growing up as a little person, and you're so immune to what the reality of it is if you were the person who's being gossiped about?
So this is something I can understand the person. My job is to say, oh, listen, they're this way because they were raised a certain way. That person, though, doesn't have the right to use that excuse. There's a philosopher that once said, if there's something in your life that happened because you were born that way or because you were in a family that taught you that way, and then you don't like it, he said, change it. You're not a tree. You can move. So, you know, trees get stuck in the same spot. You're a person. You could just get up and go here. Now, it's hard, sure, it's harder than it is for... Rabbi Yisrael Salanter once said that it's easier to study the whole Talmud 101 times than it is to change one character trait. And we underestimate how hard it is to change, for a person to change themselves. But it's still something that must be done. I tell this to people all the time. Actually, I said it on Tisha B'Av at night. I struggle very much with Judaism that's being taught today, where God is being very judgmental of people. See, we know what's right and what's wrong. We know what Hashem wants from us and what He doesn't want. Clearly, He told us in the Torah. But not all of us are there. And some of us, frankly, might never want to be there. And I hear people say, well, then you should know that Hashem's angry at you. Whatever it is, words, I'm variations of words. I instead say, well, why don't you have a relationship with Hashem enough that when you're doing something wrong, you say, Hashem, listen, I know I'm doing something wrong. I'm aware that I'm doing something wrong. I'm sorry. I might change it. I might not change it. I'm undecided yet. But to have that consciousness of a discussion, a dialogue with Hashem, at least I'm aware. I'm aware of what it is that I'm doing. Now that sounds so heretical to most people. Like, don't report your sins. You know, it's kind of like, you don't go to the police officer and tell him you ran a red light. Yeah, but he knows anyways. As he could either live a false existence with you and your Creator, or you could have some kind of dialogue and say, I have to, the very least is to be conscious. But I don't think that's what Dikla was asking, to be fair. Dikla was asking, which is worse, hating somebody overtly or hating somebody covertly? Inside or outside, which is worse?
Either one, you have to work on it.
That's right. I mean,
Because to have thoughts for any of us in our brains or in our hearts that are less than loving kindness, or at least, anything negative in here, it doesn't affect the other person. It affects you.
It doesn't affect the other person?
No.
Well,
It affects you inside. It affects your
It could be
stress.
on
It
a
affects
spiritual
your health.
level, it does affect another person. You thinking bad about them. But it affects you at that point more than it affects them. Meaning, if there's some guy down the street who hates me, and I walk by his house every Shabbat, I don't know he hates me, so he's the one who's eating himself up a lot.
that's right.
I'm not even aware of it.
You're not touched.
It could be though, the moment that he makes his hate aware to me, it's going to hit me like a train, because it's not a little bit of hate, it's a lot of hate coming out at once. It could be. It happens a lot, by the way. People keep things inside, they take it in stride, and then one day, you just say hello the wrong way to them, and you feel like there's a 18-wheeler running you over.
So what do you do about that?
Get out of the way.
This is interesting. This is the discussion we're having now. Sur merav asetov.
I'm slow. Hello.
You change lanes.
Rabbi Weinberg is suggesting. Rabbi Weinberg is suggesting that in order to work together, in order to achieve unity, a person has to truly understand the concept of tolerance, and that it's lacking in its definition. It's lacking in what it provides. Before I continue, I had a Rebbe in yeshiva, Rabbi Yosef Tamer, alav shalom, he passed away. It was a man left over from a generation that doesn't exist anymore. An American-born European Musar rabbi. Musar, everything was Musar. Everything was
I love Musa.
was a lesson for life. Everything was done on purpose. Everything was intentional. There was nothing that he did that.
What was this guy's name?
Rabbi Yosef Tamer. They wrote a book about him called
I am your servant.
I Am Your Servant. I Am Your Servant. He was like Rabbi Yosef Tamer was a very wealthy man. Very wealthy. He started the first Chalav Yisrael milk company in the United States. But he didn't keep Chalav Yisrael. But he saw there was a business opportunity to be made, and he went into the field, and it's called Pride of the Farm. You might have seen it in different stores. It's a famous Chalav Yisrael milk company. Very wealthy. And he lived on yeshiva. On yeshiva they have it's like 100-acre campus. There's about 100 rabbis living on campus. There are houses, there are townhouses, and there are little apartments. And he lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. But it's his yeshiva. And so they always try, why don't you go live in a house? Why don't you live in a townhouse? And he would say, I don't need it. There are families here with more children than I have. And so they should be in a bigger space. My wife and I can do with a 2-bedroom apartment. But he had children, Baruch Hashem, but I guess at different stages, that by the time I came to yeshiva, they were already older. His house, and the carpet was green. It never was changed since the day it was put in there. The furniture, if there was, it was furniture. It looked like, when they came to Chavetz Chaim's house, and the rabbi asked him, you only have a chair and a table? That's all you have, and a bed? Where's your furniture? So Chavetz Chaim told his guest, he said, where's your furniture? He said, I'm just visiting here. I'm going to the... He said, me too. I'm just visiting in this world also. I don't need so much stuff. This was Rabbi Teller. No. Rabbi Teller taught us to live like that, though.
That's it.
So cute.
For example, in yeshiva, Rabbi Teller he never let us wear...
He's content.
Rabbi Teller would never let us wear clothing with the brand name logo on the outside.
He's right.
So if you want to wear something, and it means a lot to you that you're going to wear a shirt that's worth more than everyone else's shirt, so at least do it in a way that's not going to hurt somebody else who doesn't have that money to buy that shirt. It says, do whatever it is that you can to minimize the divides between people. He was very into this. I remember he bought a car once, and a brand new car. He didn't like driving around a brand new car. He said it made him feel like a Baal Gaiva, like a egotistical person. So he returned it, and he always drove a second-hand car, an old... That was Rabbi Teller. We were raised by him. And he was very strict. I won't tell you that I had the best years of my life under his rule. He demanded from us what he demanded from himself. You know, Rabbi Teller, if you came late to tefillah, not you, if one of the rabbis who worked in the yeshiva came 1 minute late, 2 minutes late, he got money taken off his paycheck. And he would say, how do you expect your students to come on time to class, or if you don't come? And he said, it was an example. For the years that he was there, he threw his own son out of yeshiva. He threw his own grandson out of yeshiva. He said, you have to keep the rules just like everybody else has to keep the rules. I remember there was a boy in my class, his father was a very wealthy man. The boy was thrown out of yeshiva. And this father came and said, I'll donate a new wing to the yeshiva. $50,000, I'll give you cash. Whatever you want, Rabbi Teller told him, I don't need your money. He said, even if you go build a whole new yeshiva for us, I'm not going to take your son back. Rules are rules. Principles are principles. And what you saw in a person like that was, when he called you out on something, he wasn't doing it because he didn't like you. He wasn't doing it. He was principled. There were values in his life. And Rabbi Teller, I don't know why I'm sharing with you. Oh, I'll tell you why in just a minute. Remind me about roommates, just a second. There was a boy in this book, I Am Your Servant. He says that, he left yeshiva and he became a businessman, whatever he did. He took his wife on vacation on the East Coast and he rented a convertible, like a bright yellow car. The roof goes down. And he drives into yeshiva campus, and he tried to park it away from the main building so the Rabbi Teller wouldn't see it. And lo and behold, as he parks in the parking lot, guess who walks by the car? Rabbi Teller. Rabbi Teller looks at the convertible. And he looks at his student. He looks at the convertible. He looks at the student. He says, just make sure that your wife's wig doesn't fly off.
Your wife, why?
Your wife's wig doesn't fly off.
Oh.
He always had a...
Could say something.
You don't have a generation of people like that anymore. Somebody who...
But it's interesting, actually, but the comment that he made. He didn't make a comment why and you shouldn't. It wasn't. But in a way, when you look at the comment that he made, he didn't want the shame on his wife while you're driving a convertible,
right?
Because it can fly out.
Well, it was a very subtle.
I think he was subtly.
It was very subtle. By the way, his hints were not always that subtle. But I learned something very interesting from Rabbi Teller. Rabbi Teller was the rabbi, I don't know for how many years, 40 years, 50 years, he was the menahel of the yeshiva, like many, many years.
And this is the yeshiva in Baltimore.
In Baltimore.
Yeah.
Are you speaking of Hanek Teller?
Tendler.
Tendler. Okay.
Rabbi.
He is a famous author that lives in Harnot. I think he has 19 children and
That's somebody else.
Hanek Teller. This is
Okay.
Rabbi Tendler.
No,
Somebody else can
different families. Rabbi Teller, he was the head of the yeshiva, and he dealt with all the problems of the yeshiva. There was once a group of roommates that had problems with each other. You come to yeshiva in 9th grade, it's like going to the army. I don't know, they throw you in a room with a bunch of people you don't know. And you have to get along with them. And they came to Rabbi Teller to get their room assignment changed. Because they weren't getting along with each other. And Rabbi Teller told them, it was in my class, Rabbi Teller said, I'm not going to change your rooms. I said, what do you mean? We're having a terrible year. Our parents are going to call you. How much money they pay for tuition? Rabbi Teller said, I can change your room, but I guarantee that your marriage will not be successful. Now you're in 9th grade. What are you hearing about your marriage? Rabbi Teller said, if you can't put up with somebody sharing half of your room and sleeping in a different bed, how are you going to tolerate somebody who shares your whole room and sleeps in your bed? He said, at the very least, just draw a line down the middle of the room and say, you do whatever you want on that side of the line, and then I'm going to do whatever I want on this side of the line. But to just decide just like that you need to switch rooms, where's your working on yourself? Where's your character development? What's going to happen? By the way, some of those times, it led for the worst years of people's lives. And sometimes people became the best friends that they ever became. It was just, there is no other choice, so we're going to have to make this work. It was discipline. It was a certain, you just have to do what it needs to be done. And later on, when I went to different yeshivot, or I met different people that claimed they had went to yeshivot, the people they were taught by were not the people of the same caliber. And it has an effect on people. It has an effect. You're learning the same Torah, but the people, it's off. The people are not of the same caliber. And so the Torah comes out different. There's one kind of person that it's very hard to say tolerance to. You could say sur mera, just don't do bad, right? You don't have to do good for each other, just don't do bad. It's on a married couple. Imagine a married couple comes for some kind of counseling, and you tell them, you know what, you don't have to get along with each other. Just don't hate each other. How successful is that going to work?
No.
Doesn't sound so good.
Tell me why not. Why is it different than the roommates?
This is a lifelong 24/7.
Say something better than that.
I think I have to get to the
Well, you said it on Saturday. You said that your home really needs to be a place where you feel safe and
Yes.
comfortable, not a place where you're criticized or put down or whatnot. So if in that kind of a relationship, you can't just say to them, you don't have to hate each other, just tolerate
Each other.
That's not going to feel very good.
So that's true. It undermines what a home is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll suggest that a married couple cannot have that feeling of apathy towards each other. It has to be one extreme or the other. They're leading a shared existence. Having a shared existence and being part of the same life decisions are going to be made together, and not getting along, just tolerating, it's very hard. It leads to hatred. Oh, you don't care what I'm doing today? You don't care where I went today? You don't care? You not caring, maybe in another relationship works. When your teenager says, get off my back, I don't need you looking at me. But with a spouse, that's a whole different world. It doesn't work. It's actually...
Oh, you're coughing.
It's okay.
That's okay.
It's actually counterintuitive to everything you're trying to accomplish. And Rabbi Weinberg is going on the same path right now. And Hanan, you're full of surprises today.
Yeah, I know. Like. Thank you.
All right, so we're in the middle of the page.
Whee! Should we go play bye-bye?
So last week we were saying that you must identify yourself. Tell us who you are brutally, honestly. Tell us who you're not brutally, honestly. Don't tell us things that we already know. Don't hide behind catchphrases. Remember we spoke about this last week?
Yes,
He said, just be honest. If you want to have unity with a person, with a group especially, you have to come to the table and say, what am I really? What do I want to get out of this friendship? What do I not want to get out of this friendship? What do I despise about you? Not just what I love about you. You have to be very painfully honest.
And when you are, if the other person gets very pissed.
Right.
Well, no. So here you have to remember, this is not a personal dialogue. This is between groups.
Yes.
This is between groups of people. Groups of people want to get along with each other, and you want to come to the table and figure out how to have a joint existence and a common denominator that unites us. And you have to first discuss what divides us too. And obviously this can only be done in a setting where both sides are willing to be that open and honest.
Yes.
One side being that open and honest will just be painful.
That's true. That's right.
Both sides have to agree.
Yeah, but I think what Everill's saying is true, where there's a great poem by Emily Dickinson, where it's tell the truth but tell it with a slant, where it's true you do have to tell the truth and you have to be very clear. You can't say one thing and something else, but there's a way of saying it. Meaning when you fight, you
But
don't have to
Weinberg
fight.
disagrees with Emily Dickinson.
I know.
Okay, so he's saying...
But I'm telling you that you can fight the issue, and as two groups, you can come together and you can be brutally honest without being brutal, without killing each other, without shooting darts that nobody can listen. Because when you're so brutal, so the honesty
Are
gets
you
lost.
saying kill him with kindness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
we don't-
notice
no,
what
no.
she just said. I want you to understand what my wife just did. She did exactly what Rabbi Weinberg told her not to do. She pitched an idea and got you to buy a catchphrase.
Which
Tell a
was
lie,
what? Which was
but
what?
tell it with a slant.
No.
Yeah, wait a second. Wait
No,
a second.
no.
Wait a second. And then what she did was convince you that what she said is right. And then what she did, listen
Because
very
I'm
well.
always right.
Listen
You
very
know
well.
that. It just takes a while to figure it
And
out.
then when Marilyn said, do you mean to kill them with kindness, which is not a positive thing? She said yes. Understand? This is what Rav Weinberg is saying. Everybody who has a slogan is passing off an idea as being very nice. But then ask them the reverse side of the coin. So, do you really want to accomplish that? Yes. Well then, your idea is not as glorious as we thought it was.
No, I think the idea is to get a common denominator and to figure out what are our differences, what are our strengths,
I was
and
using
how do
you
we
as an
work together.
example.
I know. But I honestly think, and I could disagree with Rabbi Weinberg, that when you're brutal, people don't listen. They don't hear the honesty. You don't get past that defense mechanism of you're hurting me, so I'm going to put up a shield. Versus, I'll tell you the truth, but I'll tell it to you in a way that both of us can really understand. Because if we want to get to a place of mutual understanding, it's not going to happen through throwing darts.
Isn't it
Honesty, yes, but not through throwing darts.
Isn't it like the best way to kill a bee is through honey?
Right, the question is, though, do we want to kill?
You know, and
I don't know that we want to kill me. Sometimes.
sometimes you just don't know. I'm going to share something with you. I had a longtime friend I know her since I'm in 4th grade. She lives up in Los Angeles. And she got very sick with a couple of serious diseases. She was on morphine. She was on all sorts of stuff. And she was calling me continuously, slurring her words. She couldn't. That went on for about a year and a half. And I finally had to just tell her, brutally, honest, I cannot do this with you. You're in a circle. You're repeating the same thing over and over again. You're not moving forward. I was brutally honest. We stopped our friendship. I know her since 4th grade. We stopped our friendship. She called me. We reconnected, I want to say, at least a year ago. And she's off of everything. She's back to herself. And what she said to me is, I was out of it. I was on morphine. I was on everything else. But you were so brutally honest with me. I remember every word you said, and it changed my life.
For the good or the bad?
For the good. She got off of the morphine. She got off of everything else. She doesn't have 24/7 nurses anymore.
But I don't disagree.
She's driving the car. She's got life. But that's not the ordinary kind of thing.
No, more than that, you telling her that was coming from a place of love or coming from a place of hatred?
Love.
Love. Okay, so that's the premise. If it's coming from love,
She was part of that group.
Right.
I know her since I'm in 4th grade.
Wow.
So, I'm not disagreeing that you could tell the truth with a slant in a place where it's not going to be hurtful. Here we're talking about a place where two movements, two groups, two ideologies want to dialogue. They cannot dialogue unless they are very, very, very honest and clear about what it is that they believe.
What if the beliefs are so opposite in their brutal honesty?
This is the way the world has taught us. The world has taught us, don't focus on what separates us. Focus on how much we have in common. We have so much in common that we're aware of it. We don't need to focus on what's in common. I could tell you 101 things we have in common. We're Jews, we believe in Hashem, we have the same Torah, we pray with the same books, we read the same Torah. We have a lot of things in common. But there are things that divide us, and that's why we're two different groups. And those things that divide us are not bad, per se. They might do it for you, and this might do it for me, but we have to be aware that there are such things that divide us. You see, if I didn't know that in my synagogue we sing everything, and in my wife's synagogue they scream everything, and I was just innocently giving a speech about the importance of singing during prayer, and how terrible it is when people scream during prayer, right? If I would give such a speech, I didn't do it to hurt anybody, but I inevitably would lose my partner to peace, because I was not aware of what divides us. And it's a mistake. It's a mistake. The world tells you don't focus. But if you don't focus on it, how are you ever going to know? So what Rav Weinberg says at them, Tmehim, you asked me, why focus on this? L'shema, for what? For what reason should we focus on what divides us? Hatshuva lekach hi pshuta. He said the answer for this is very simple. כדי שתיווצר אפשרות לעבוד בצוותא למען מטרות משותפות. In order so that we may create an opportunity to work together to reach common goals, we must focus on what divides us.
Excuse me. Rabbi Nachman has a book, and I think I have the title correct, Walking the Narrow Bridge.
Could be.
And I've always thought about that title they chose for the book. Because what you're talking about is you're walking a very narrow, it's like you're on the edge of a blade, a very thin bridge. And learning how to navigate is a whole lifetime's journey. It's a whole lifetime's work.
It's an art. And no one guarantees that you're never going to fall off the cliff.
That's right.
But you have to try. And there are people who go so far inland because they're afraid to walk on the cliff, but they never see the view. They never enjoy the beauty of what it is to look out and see the world. We're always in safe zones. We're always trying to be, I'm using this word roughly in this scenario, politically correct. It's good to be not offensive. I agree with that term. You don't want to hurt other people. But to the point where We listened to a comedian last night. I asked my wife if it's okay, like, and I watched a little clip. Am I allowed to share it in a class? Yeah, I think so.
It was funny.
There was an Arab comedian, called himself a Palestinian comedian, in which a very cute line he said in there. He said, the Jews said we're the same thing. So, we have us and the Israelis, and we both have dark skin. He said we both have moms that are crazy. He said we have a lot in common. So we're both chosen. He said you're chosen by God, and we're chosen by the FBI. He had a good sense of humor about himself. But he said something very interesting. He said that very often when an American meets him, and they want to guess his nationality, and by the way, you might not know this, but people do this to Sfaradim all the time. They want to guess your nationality, and they say, "Oh, are you Italian? Are you Greek? Are you?" I said, nobody's ever going to guess, "Are you Arab?" because that's offensive in this country. And so by the very fact that they won't guess it, it's already being offensive. And so what happens? And then what happens? You must have friends that do this. "Oh, you're Jewish? You don't look Jewish." You ever had someone do that to you?
Yes.
What does that mean? What does that mean? It says you don't look Jewish. Is that a compliment? Is that a backhanded compliment? Like, you're Jewish, but you don't look like it. I'm so proud of you. Like, what does that mean?
It's a backhand compliment.
It's not a compliment.
It's not a
I don't
compliment
think
at
that
all.
they mean it as I think
just
something like that
Ignorance.
is an expression. They're speaking from their whole life's view.
Oh,
Their
well,
whole life's view might have been that they lived in New York and they never saw a blonde Jew. They think, it should look like the dark-haired Italian New York Jews.
my wife and I all have this discussion all the time. There are certain people in our families that it's a goy shepunim, but their Jews have all kinds of faces. What do you mean?
I know.
But yes,
They went to the same doctor.
but
Dr. Diamond. He
the truth is that in order to work together, you have to be aware of each other. And very often, especially in this great country, which is a melting pot, we pretend like we're so open-minded in this country. We're very cultured. We have all kinds of people from different nationalities. And you ask yourself, we're one of the few countries in the world, maybe the only country in the world, that only speaks one language.
Yes.
Which two?
Spanish?
No, your average American doesn't speak Spanish.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, but you go to the ATM and there's Spanish right there, and you.
That's done. That's done, by the way, out of political correctness. That's done. So when I come, if you speak Spanish, press 2, right? That's. I always wonder what it feels like to press 2.
It's going to be press 1, really.
Yeah.
That's right.
But what I'm sharing with you is that we pretend to be this great bastion of culture and nations, and this is the place where everyone can come to, but not really, and that's been a reason why in this country so many nations have come and needed to melt in. The Jews came here and they said they got an 11th commandment. We must melt. We must assimilate. We must mix in, because it doesn't do well for Jews when you don't mix in. It doesn't do well for the Japanese when you don't mix in. It doesn't do well for the Chinese when they don't mix in. In other countries maybe, but not here. And so, under the guise of political correctness and tolerance, we're actually not so educated in other people's languages and other people's... How many people really know the difference? Not you. I've heard children say this all the time. "Oh, do you speak Mexican?" Mm-hmm. That's not even a language. And how many people know that Spanish people from Spain are not the same thing as Mexicans from Mexico, and they're definitely not the same thing as Brazilians from Brazil. But somebody from somebody from South America would know all those differences.
That's because we don't have good
Education.
Right.
Absolutely.
They don't
But
teach
this
geography.
education stems. I'll tell you, this lack of education stems, in my thought, from the fact that we're so afraid to talk about these things. We're so afraid to use labels of countries and nations and races that we don't even discuss them. But when you don't discuss them, what you're really doing is you're also taking away from another person their heritage and their culture, and they deserve also to know. My wife's been teaching in Torah High School, Baruch Hashem, the beautiful school here in San Diego, and she's been teaching halachot, and always, like we do, and it's always our style, Ashkenazim do this, Sfaradim do that. Ashkenazim do this, Sfaradim do that. Whatever it's relevant to say both sides, both opinions. He's okay, don't worry. Both opinions. And she has a few girls in her class that are Sephardic. And they were very emotional the first time they heard this. Because in all their years going to school in San Diego, under the guise of being taught Judaism, they were never taught Ashkenazi Judaism. No, nobody in San Diego is that presumptuous, by the way. You live in a very nice place. There are places where we're only Ashkenazi. There are such places. Not San Diego. San Diego's not one of them. San Diego's like, we're just Jewish. But in that we're just Jewish, there's an entire side of Judaism that is never represented. And what that does to a person who knows that they're somewhat different or they're a little bit, have a different tradition, what it does to them is squelch their inner... I'm telling you as a person of experience. I went through the same system. And I didn't have anybody to do for me what she does for her. And what it does, under the guise of trying to represent a unified front, you're essentially getting rid of all the beauty and all the differences that are inside of the groups.
It lowers your self-esteem a little bit also, because you start to wonder, how come it's different in my house?
Yes.
How come my family's different? What is it? Are we weird? Or, maybe we eat foods that are weird, or we have practices that are different. And when you're a kid, you want to be alike.
Mm-hmm. And I think
it's true.
More than that, it doesn't let you, like you said, it doesn't let you really tackle the issue. We had this conversation when we were talking about illegal immigrants, right? So the new term is they're not illegal, they're undocumented. And we're having a conversation, why do we need to keep on coming up with new terms for old terms because we want to be politically correct when we're not actually letting the issue be the issue? Right. They are illegal. Now, I'm not saying let's deport them, but we're saying so now we have to figure out how and if we want to legalize it. Right. But by pretending it's just undocumented, so first of all, we're trivializing their issue. We're just saying, oh, you just need a couple of papers. And we're never tackling the real issue. Similar to when one of the professors brought him from Bill, M-A-H-E-R. I don't know what, Mayer? Yeah. So he was talking about the word thugs. He said, when you can't call an issue what it actually is, you're never going to be able to deal with it. So what we keep on doing in an attempt to be so politically correct, we're evading the real issues. And if we evade the real issues, so we have a bunch of niceness, but we have nothing actually happening.
So let's keep reading because of what he says. He says, so how does focusing on our differences help us unite? Listen to what he says. Only once we know what divides us can we sit down and contemplate the options for working together. רק כאשר תישלל כל אפשרות להבריח סחורה אסורה ובלתי חוקית תחת הסוואה של פירמה חוקית וחותמת כשרה. He said, just when I have a guarantee that me and you joining forces together will not be you using my name as a kosher stamp. That's what he says, chotemet kshera, or as some kind of legalization of illegal merchandise. He said, only then can I decide that we're going to work together. I'll give you a great example. There's always been debate in Israel, especially in the circles that I was teaching. Do we join forces with the Christian groups that come to Israel to support Israel? Do we do joint conventions with them? Do we allow them to speak? Do we go to their events and speak? Do we do joint events? It's a valid question. We don't have enough friends in the world to make new enemies. The question though is, what kind of friendships are there? To have, these kind of topics, they make for strange bedfellows. You have all kinds of different people that show up in all kinds of groups you would have never imagined exist in the world, and they exist, and they have... The truth is that very often these Christian groups, they mean well. They really do love Israel. Not for the same reasons you might love Israel, but they love Israel. And then you come to this event, and it's a beautiful event. You come to this event, and... Is there someone sitting here? Okay. You come to this joint event, and it's very nice. You have rabbis and preachers and doctors and scientists and all kinds of things, and everyone's handing out their own pamphlets. The Jewish organizations are handing out their pamphlets, and it's all a united front. But some of those pamphlets have all kinds of things about Jesus in them, and about the second coming, and we're going to help the Jews, and he can come back. And the question is, they're not doing it. I want to believe there are groups that do things maliciously. There are such evangelical groups that pretend to be friends and then use... I'm talking about people who don't intend to do that, but just by joining forces with them, you're allowing them you're allowing them to smuggle illegal goods while using your stamp, because on the back of that pamphlet it says the Jewish Voice for Israel, or whatever it's going to say. And then all of a sudden, now the Jewish Voice for Israel is a partner in missionary activities in Israel without intending to do it. This is so if I don't focus, I know that we all agree on Israel. Well, let's focus on what divides us about Israel. How do you want to see Israel? Because if we're doing this together, we will end up using each other and our names for things that neither of us want to happen.
Unless you set and clarified in
Very
the
good.
beginning,
Very
with total
good.
honesty, what's the purpose that they want to be there and create that unity.
So why don't people ever sit down and clarify? What's the danger of sitting down and clarifying?
The brutality.
Well, there is a lot of ego of I don't.
Come to an agreement.
Oh, it's all
The truth.
You might no, you might not reach an agreement. Maybe if
Okay.
the Jews and the Christians really sit down and dialogue, they'll decide it's not a good idea for us to work together.
Good.
And that hurts their 21st century ego more than let's work together and get in a terrible fight in 10 years from now because we realize that we reached a point where we are on two different
Well,
airplanes.
they're hoping by then their children have taken over the organization and they don't have to deal with it.
Right.
But
It's
that's,
true.
That's putting Band-Aid. It's putting Band-Aid for the moment.
But the truth is that things that start off, Rav Weinberg, my brother once shared with me an idea from Rav Weinberg. Both my brothers learned from Rav Noach Weinberg in Eish Torah in Jerusalem. And one of them told me that when he was going through dating, Sir Rav Weinberg told him something very interesting. He said, you might both be in love. And right now you're right here. But if you're both flying on different flights to different countries, as much as you love each other, you'll end up in a different country. He said, if you're going to board a flight to the United States from Jerusalem, and she's going to board a flight to Australia from Jerusalem, you love each other, but you will end up in two different places. Right now, you found the common denominator between the two. But did you focus enough on what divides you? Yeah, I'll take a great example. I always ask my students, did you talk about school yet for your kids? You know what they always tell me? Rabbi, I'm dating. Why would I talk to them about school? Kids, that's the worst topic to bring up when you're dating, is to talk about kids. And I said, but the truth is, it's going to become a problem for you. And it's not a problem that's never going to, maybe some people, but for most people, 3 years, 4 years of ignorance is bliss, and then you're going to fight. You're going to fight about, do I want them to go to Jewish school? Do I want them to go to public? Well, I want them to go to Jewish school. Do I know how much Jewish school costs? Do you know what I'm going to have to give up in my life to send my kids to Jewish school? Ask any of our parents. Yeah, my parents always say they could have done cruises around the world if they had not sent us to Jewish school.
They were right.
But yeah,
They were right.
my uncle, by the way, is a rabbi in Israel, and when he heard how much we pay for yeshiva in America, he said, I could sign you up for every yeshiva in Israel and still fly you home for Shabbat every weekend, and it still would be cheaper than paying for tuition in the United States. Have you ever thought about, my wife and I got married. My wife and I, if you didn't realize, come from slightly different backgrounds. And even though we are, Baruch Hashem, we are where those two worlds meet, kids, where would we send our kids? Now in America, San Diego, we don't have a large variety of Jewish schools. But let's say we would be in Yerushalayim. Would we send our kids to a Hasidic school? Not a bad idea. They have a great education, but it would be very Hasidic, and that means they would speak Yiddish at school. Do I mind? No, truth is I don't really mind if my kids speak Yiddish at school. It's not a deal breaker for me. But there are other values that might come along with that would bother me. For example, the philosophy, the stance on Israel, for example, would be a very big problem for me. I would want my kids to go to a Zionistic school, because that's what I am. And therefore, I would need that philosophy to exist. Okay, so let's say there are schools, by the way. The religious Zionist world has these little neo-Hasidic schools. They're Hasidic Zionists. It's an interesting world. So you have these schools. But let me ask you this question. Are secular studies a value for us? Because some of these schools don't really believe in a value of a secular education. Well, coming from my background, secular studies are very important. My wife is clearly someone who believes in a college education, and therefore for her, secular studies are also very important. But would we really, if we had to choose between a better Jewish education or secular, and all kinds of things that we had to discuss, because if not, it's going to come up. It will come up, and it could be a very divisive issue. A very divisive issue. And so people think that, hey, let's not talk about the things that are, right now we're dating, we'll get married, we'll figure all this thing, we'll cross the bridge when we get there.
No.
You know, there is an option that you'll get to the bridge, and some of you will decide, you go alone, I'm not crossing this bridge. I do it all the time. Whenever my wife takes me somewhere scary, you go alone, I'm not going. She says, I want to go skydiving. Good, I'll take pictures. Yeah, we're not always will I agree to do certain things. Just
As long as you fund it, you don't need to cross the bridge.
there you go.
The tolls are
Do you tell them how much the tolls on the George Washington Bridge are? Yeah.
We got stuck right off the Tri-Borough Bridge, so it was...
Our car broke down.
That is awful.
It was awful.
It was.
It was actually fun. It was awful, but it was awful.
Marilyn, where are you from in New York?
Sheepshead Bay, Brighton Beach area.
Not the Bronx. 138th Street.
Oh my
I used
God,
to
that's
teach up
horrible.
in that area.
I'll tell you, it was 2:00 in the morning, and
That's
the
scary.
drug dealers were 24/7. They were open like it was Rite Aid. You know, it was.
And can you imagine the parents in San Diego? We know everything.
You don't want to know. Now, yeah.
No,
No, we were dead.
the car started, the lights on the dashboard started going up and down, empty, full. So we were in line for the tolls. My husband said, you know what?
I had a great idea.
Turn the
We do
engine
this-
off and try turning it back on.
That was it.
Uh-oh.
And then everyone behind you was stuck.
Honking the street.
So they're honking and yelling and rubbernecking, and all the cop is all grumpy, and he pulled the chain down to close and open the next cash lane. But the cop was really nice. Another one, he came and he escorted
They tow us.
off,
They
and-
tow you off the first exit on the freeway. I mean, they don't. You have to call your AAA or whatever from there. So they tow you off the freeway, and we find ourselves in the Bronx in a neighborhood that at 1:00 in the morning we didn't want to be there. It wasn't a nice place to be. I'm sure that we would have survived the night, maybe, but we. No, I'm not. It was a tough situation.
I thought the people, they were nice. No, honestly.
The guy who kept giving his middle finger to the police officer. What about that one? Tell me about him. Yeah, okay, good.
No, but when they passed us, nobody cursed. In fact, they extended help.
They
Now,
wanted
I
to
don't know
invite
if
you
they
into
extended
their
help
house.
because they wanted the car.
So this
Look at like someone who was born and raised in New
Right,
York.
I
You get used to it.
this Irish policeman.
You don't want to be
This
there
Irish
to be
policeman
there.
gave us a ride. He gave us a ride.
My husband was freaking out.
And he stayed with us for an hour and 15 minutes about. He didn't leave. He just wanted us to be with him, and then he came back every 20 minutes to check on us. And AAA response time in New York,
3 hours.
Really?
they came after 2.5 hours because we had a baby. They told me that night, if it wasn't for the baby, they would have been there in 4 hours. 4:00 was the estimated time of arrival.
It's crazy.
It's a different world, Kavod.
I'm here like in
You
5
know,
What are they up to? 9 million, and with all the boroughs and everything else, it's not a manageable place. San Diego is not as manageable in 2015 as it was in 1984 when I moved here, and it's going to get worse. But we're a lot better than New York.
Right.
I
Right.
know he was born in this neighborhood. He doesn't know New York. That's what he was freaking.
So why was I telling you? Why was I telling you about New York, about bridges? You have to know who are you joining forces with, and you have to be aware of the obstacles that may come up in the future. If you don't discuss them now, later it might be too late.
Yes.
And the damage of breaking up, so to speak, such an organization or a relationship or an arrangement is perhaps worse than ever having not done it in the first place. And he keeps going. And he says, but there's all that.
Where are we?
Can you do this? In the...
Did they try to jump in the car?
Oh, they did. We had a nice Mexican driver stop and bring his cables out.
במילים אחרות, in other words, רק לאחר שנשתכנע,
איפה אנחנו?
2 paragraphs under אנא להזדהות. רק לאחר שנשתכנע, only once you have convinced us, כי התחברות, that our connection with you, לא תביא רפיון במוחותיהם של חלושי אופי בתוכנו. You know, we're not worried about the rabbis becoming Christians, right? That's not the fear. Who are we worried about that might get attracted to these ideas?
The weak ones.
The weak ones. Those who are not either not so knowledgeable about these issues or are more naive than other ones. He said, only once we are convinced that connecting with you will not lead to any kind of laxity or losing out on by the weaker people among us, ביחס לערכים שאין בהם מן המשותף לנו, regarding values that are not similar between us, אלא להפך, rather opposite, הם מפרידים בינינו, מאלצים שדחק אחד מהשני, those values that actually cause us to want to stay away from each other, only once I know that we will never reach a point where the weaker among us are going to be threatened by worldviews that we already agreed that we don't agree on. And we've made a formula to work together and never to cross into those areas which are gray for us. Only then can I actually agree to positively work together with you. חלילה לנו מתת יד לכך שבהסוואתה של אדרת האחדות והליכוד. He said, God forbid that we should give a hand to you and be blinded by such words like unity and togetherness. תעלה מקרבנו המקוריות האופיינית הספציפית שבכל פלג מאיתנו. He said, then both of us will lose out. We will both lose out if we join forces. We'll lose out on the unique ideas which divide us, which we don't agree on. if getting together means that we have to give up what separates us, then essentially what we're asking from each other is stop being who you are. The Kutzker Rebbe once said it's the best. It's very little tricky, so just listen carefully. The Kutzker Rebbe said, if I am I because you are you, then I am not I, and you are not you. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am truly I, and you are truly you. I can't become something because that's the way you need me to be. You know anybody going to a relationship, they say a man goes to a relationship hoping his wife will never change, and she does. And a wife goes to a relationship hoping her husband will change, and he never does. Yeah, it's sometimes you go in somewhere and you're hoping that something will happen, but it doesn't happen. Or you're hoping something won't happen, and it does. He said we have to know beforehand what are the obstacles that we will inevitably run into.
They could change to a degree.
Imagine that we all got together.
Smaller. After 48 years, there is hope.
Imagine for a moment that all the denominations of Judaism in San Diego, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Humanistic, throw all of them in there, decided we have a brilliant idea. The Federation is going to fund a unity shul. One synagogue, great synagogue of San Diego. We're going to get together, we're going to have a huge building, and it's going to have a mikvah inside of it, it's going to have a kosher restaurant inside of it, then all the rabbis are going to sit on the front table with each other, and then we're going to take... It sounds like a wonderful idea, but have you ever for a moment thought, what's it going to look like that first Shabbat? Who's going to lead services? And with which prayer book? And where are the ladies going to sit in respect to the men? And what kosher symbol is going to be on the food in the restaurant? And you're leading to issues. And you have to stop for a moment and say, maybe I'm suggesting a very brazen thing. Maybe for the sake of peace, it would be better not to build that Tower of Babel where we don't understand each other. Maybe we are better off saying that for right now, these two things just cannot mix together. Because it sounds great, we'll build a beautiful building, comes time for the first Shabbat services, and we're going to be beating each other up in the pews of the synagogue. So what's the point of that? What did you accomplish with this unity? You accomplished that on paper, it looked great. But you never sat down and said, well, what book are we going to use? Do we read which parsha? Are we following the 1-year Orthodox cycle or the 3-year cycle from the other denominations? Are we even going to have a rabbi speak? Well, what language is he going to speak in? What tunes are we going to sing? Are we going to be singing Shlomo Carlebach? Or are we going to be singing Debbie Friedman? What is it that we're going to do? And you know what you're going to have? You're going to have a very disenchanted Jewish people.
Then you have to have tolerance.
Right, and then you have to tolerate each other.
Way more than that.
Now we're back to the first sentence of the class.
You don't have
Yeah.
churches that they have one service at 9 o'clock and one is at 10 and one is at 11.
Like a movie theater.
So what
It's going to be... Yeah.
But no, that,
By the way, there are such places in America. There were in the early years of the Reform movement, they tried to start these interfaith buildings, which was instead of every religion having to buy their own building, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews should buy one building. The Muslims will take it on Fridays, the Jews on Saturdays, and the Christians on Sundays. That way you only have to pay rent to one organization.
Oh, wow.
And it was a brilliant idea, except for they realized that the Muslims coming on Friday and the Jews coming on... It wasn't going to be a good shidduch. It wasn't happening. It just wasn't going to work out very well. And it doesn't mean that we cannot do certain things together. It doesn't mean that we can't get together and do something. But there was a rabbi not so long ago who has a very good friend who's an imam. And they decided, hey, imams have a big problem, the Muslims have a problem, is that most of them are relying on kosher certification for meat because they don't have enough halal certification. And so these two came up with a great idea. Why don't you come with me when I certify the kosher food, and you'll also certify halal. And then we'll have a joint kosher halal certification. Now, that could be, by the way, an interesting project that would have been able to been worked on. But you have to understand what would happen. Which kind of Jew would eat a halal hechsher?
No one.
And which kind of Muslim would eat something with a starved? You'd have right. But what you would be doing is maybe instead of a joint synagogue, maybe a joint hechsher would be a good. I'm leaving it up to brainstorm. We left JFK. There's a synagogue over there in Queens. Where is it? Kew Garden Hills? No.
Yes.
Okay. There was a Chabad house that owned a big Jewish center, and then right next to them there was the New York Muslim center. I don't know what they were called. And the Chabad rabbi lost his money, he lost his building. And he didn't have anywhere to go for services. This made the news like 2 years ago. You could look it up. And this mosque, the imam invited him to take the mosque for services on Shabbat because they don't use it, and they should have. And we're allowed to pray in the mosque, and so they had till today, if I'm not mistaken, they still have this Chabad house inside of a mosque. And it sounds crazy to you, perhaps. This imam lost half of the membership in his mosque. They were not willing to do it. The New York Times came to interview him. Was it worth it for you to lose all your members? And it was an interesting discussion. Obviously, he's in a different place than perhaps other people might be, but there's not a black and white that we can never work together. But we have to pick very carefully what it is that we do work together on. Because sometimes deciding to be united on the wrong things can lead to more strife and more conflict than we had originally imagined. And it's not a good idea. And this, by the way, doesn't sound normal. We don't speak like this in the 21st century. But these are very wise words from a man who clearly saw this a long time ago and said, if you want to work together with us, you have to be willing to talk with us about the problems that we're going to come into. And unfortunately, he's writing this to his non-religious Israeli brother. This dialogue has never happened. We've never had this chance to sit down with each other at the table and say we both think that certain things about each other are crazy. But there are certain things about each other that are united. You know, my students in Israel, all of them served in the Israeli army. All of them. But it's not a simple thing for me to send a boy from yeshiva to the Israeli army. It's not a simple thing. It's a value for us, and that's why we do it. But it's not the most religious years they're ever going to experience in their life. And it's not because the army doesn't try. The army does try to do things religious, but there's only so much you can expect from someone who doesn't know so much to do it. And if we would have instead sat down and had some kind of meaningful dialogue of, what do we really need? And is it worth it for you? Is it worth it for you to put out the things that we really need? You know, these Hasidim in Mea Sharim are not wrong. In order to build an army infrastructure that they would feel comfortable in, you should be setting yourself up for failure. It's never going to work. It's going to cost too much money. It's going to be a pain. They're not actually ever going to listen to your orders. They're always going to listen to their rabbi in yeshiva somewhere. You have to know what are the conflicts that you're setting yourself up for. But it could be that if we had had that dialogue, it wouldn't have been so taboo, because the security of Israel is something that we all need to work together on. It's not something we have a luxury of saying, hey, only some of us are going to deal with. But a dialogue has to happen first. The problems that we're going to have to face have to be addressed first, on both ends. What's it going to be like when you're in the middle of some kind of training exercise, which is not life-threatening, and half the guys in your group say, hey, it's Shabbat today, we got to go take a vacation. You know what that does to the morale of the other soldiers? You know what happens when you're supposed to look a certain way or be on time in a certain place in your base, but only the religious boys, they can come an hour late because they have to pray. Do you know what that does to the other people in the group?
Absolutely.
But you're not talking about these problems because they're not politically correct enough to talk about them.
So, Rabbi,
Yeah.
just today I was talking to a friend, and we were saying, she pointed out that, Abraham negotiated with Hashem on behalf of...
Sodom.
Yeah. And we were joking, we were saying we need some special holidays a couple times during the year where all the Jewish people, no matter what your denomination is, praise to God for our unity. We come together when the IDF is at war, and we all pray for the Israeli soldiers, right? And then, knock wood, we've done okay. We need to get out there, all of us, all the denominations, and pray that the disparate groups inside of Judaism can find a way to talk to each other. Because together, individually, we're not doing so good. We need to go upstairs and ask for help for
Can
that.
I be your devil's advocate?
Sure.
It's a beautiful idea, and we had this idea in Jerusalem once. You should hear what we did. We decided we were going to have a Friday night unity services at the Kotel, which was all the different yeshivas in the Old City and the different seminaries. Even though during the year we all have different philosophies and different worldviews, and some are more to this direction, some more to that, let's have one Friday night. We all go down to the Kotel and pray together. The reaction to this was incredible. Very powerful. People were jumping on it. People who we never thought would ever sit with us at the same table wanted to sit with us. And then there were parts of it that were very hurtful. There were people, heads of seminaries, teachers, who said, we are going to boycott this event. We won't go because we will sit with you, but not with her.
But it doesn't have to could be together. I could be in my place. You could be in your
And-
place.
and what did it
we're
do?
saying the same prayer
Wait, what did
to
it
the
do?
upstairs God.
We all got together. And the attitude was,
forgiveness.
we are so much better than those people who didn't come.
Oh, no.
And then what happened? What happened was, in my opinion, it was worse than just, let's all just stay separate. Now, it could be that I'm wrong. I'm willing to say that I'm wrong. But what I feel is, can I guarantee that everybody will come to the table? And if not, then I'm really making the other people look bad. There was a time here in San Diego, it was a dream, but it never happened. There was a man who decided that he was going to push an agenda to have a joint rabbinic council in San Diego. No, not this one. Not what they do today. These guys checking for bugs, but something real, something where you'd have a real rabbinic council where we would agree to disagree, but there are certain issues that we have to dialogue on a communal level for. You know what New York has? If a holiday falls out on Monday morning, they don't take the trash out in Brooklyn because Jews won't take the trash out of their homes, and therefore they'll make garbage pickup the next day. All those communities that don't get along with each other, they still vote for the same councilman or councilwoman who's going to take care of their joint interests. You know what happens when school buses are blocking the roads and people have to get to shul? So they work it out that there's going to be a time that people... There are certain things that we all face the same problems about. You know, all these communities building Arabs in San Diego, if they would have all sat down and shared the blueprints with each other and then filed for the same attorney to do all the permits together, do you know how much money would have been saved? Now, it would have never happened, not in the current situation that San Diego's in. But that would have been, it's a communal issue that people, I don't agree with you on anything, but that's a communal issue. There are problems with anti-Semitism in San Diego, so there has to be a united Jewish front. And why was I inspired about this? I had a friend who used to work in the mayor's office, the one who got in trouble for all kinds of things. Yeah. This mayor met once a month with different denominations of priests in San Diego. They used to have them for breakfast once a month, and they would tell over their issues that they need taken care of, and it was kind of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. We kind of had this, they were getting things done that they needed in the city. It was a good relationship. So he asked if there were any rabbis that he could come and sit down and talk to. Is there a meeting of all the rabbis in San Diego once a month or once a year or once I said, never happened, not in the history of San Diego. Probably never going to happen either. But we tried it. Someone tried. Someone went. Someone who's non-denominational went to different denominations. And they came back, and I'm not saying this, God forbid, out of an egotistical thing. I'm saying this is the truth what happened. He said, Rabbi, what can I tell you? When I showed the list to every other rabbi, everyone crossed off a name from the list they couldn't sit with. The only one that was willing to come to the table regardless of who was on the list was you. She said, if you want to start your own rabbinical council, you can, but you don't have any partners in this plan. And I'll tell you what that does. When leaders aren't able to get along with each other, the communities, there is no hope. There just is no hope. The hopes will be dashed. So I agree with you. There must be something done that brings Jews of all backgrounds together. It's for this reason that we need to be together.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not certain that it's to bring people around the same table physically. I'm saying that, Yom Kippur, we all kind of go, it's communal prayers, yes, but we go into our own personal space. Am I right? And we say our prayers. We ask for forgiveness between. We do that. Do we pray truly for the unity of all Jewish people?
Well, my mother's right. We pray for this all the time. Do we mean it? That's a different question. We pray for it, but do we mean it? And by the way, especially on Yom Kippur.
And do we have the kavanah to focus on that? But what if we had one day where that's what we did? It was the prayer and the fast and everything else was not for the 9th of Av. It was for today.
So maybe I can share with you a story.
People, for all the different 100,000 sects out there that can't get along and can't agree, we actually talked to Hashem and asked Him to intervene.
So you're right. We need to do such a thing. We do such a thing, but I'll tell you why we don't mean it. There's a story from Rav Shlomo Karbach. A story from Rav Shlomo Karbach. I want to end today's class with a story. Rav Shlomo Karbach, he had his whole, he called them Holy Hippolach. And they were that was what he did.
Holy Hippolach?
Yeah. So Rav Shlomo had a whole concert with it. This whole crew, back in the day where everybody wanted world peace. Today I don't think anybody talks about world peace anymore.
Not possible.
So he got on his microphone and he's strumming his guitar. You know Rav Shlomo, how you look with his vest and his kippah with his hair.
You have to see him to know really what's he.
And Rav Shlomo's strumming and like, who wants world peace? And so there were thousands of people at this concert. I think Rabbi Aaron shared this in his class, no?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, he did.
And he said, we want world peace! And who really wants world peace? Everybody should get along with it. We want world peace! And then Rav Shlomo said, well then, hug the person sitting next to you. And Rav Shlomo's, nobody did. Because that one spilled popcorn on me, that buddy was talking on his cell phone, that was took my chair.
Touch women.
Yeah, whatever. So what happened was that Rav Shlomo said, you see, we want world peace. We do. We pray in our Siddur that we should all get along with each other. Yeah, but I don't mean with you. Come on, who talked about you? Just like when I say, Hashem, I forgive everybody in the world, except for him. Just why are you saying Hashem, forgive everybody in the world? So just say, I forgive most people in the world. But we say things and we don't really mean them. So perhaps for today, I want to end off the class so people could go. I'm still here to talk about whatever it is once people go. But perhaps it's a day, it's a time to think that the phrases that we've been sold, these catchphrases of tolerance, of unity, of togetherness, of common denominators, of all kinds of common goals and joint interests, many of these are catchphrases. They have value to them, but they're blinding people with their simplicity. There's another side to the coin. Do you want unity? Well, who am I uniting with? Do I want to tolerate? Is tolerating a patronizing word? Do I want to get along with somebody? Sure. But what happens when we don't get along, or we know we won't get along, so what happens then? Are we going to agree to disagree? Or is agreeing to disagreeing also just a very part of tolerance, patronizing kind of word? What do you mean I agree to disagree? We have this conversation. The reason we're fighting is because we agreed to disagree. And I always tell people tell me, Rabbi, let's agree to disagree. Because I've been fighting you for 20 minutes because we're disagreeing. Of course we agree that we disagree. Now we have to agree that I'm right. That's not the... we can't... What do you mean agree to disagree? The person has to... But we use words. We have catchphrases. And that's what Rav Weinberg is saying. Just not sismaot, just not catchphrases. I'll take anything in the world. I'll take anybody in the world as my partner to dialogue, but without catchphrases. Hashem, it's still time for Elul, we still have tshuva, we still have unity. We're going to reach that day on Yom Kippur, we say, we are even going to pray today with those people who are sinners, who are the worst of the worst, we're going to pray with them. And it's a very interesting phrase. How could we say such a thing? Are we judging other people on the day that we don't want to be judged? It's a different class for that day when we get there, Hashem. But for right now, this is step 2 of the first one, not catchphrases. Step 2, let's identify ourselves so we can identify the problems we will inevitably have. And next week is all about tolerance, which is impossible. So God willing, I'm looking forward to that. Bezrat Hashem.